Hello, my friend, and welcome to this study. I've got something very nice for you today. I'm sitting here in this study in the evening. I've got the window open. You can hear the fountain in the garden and a few evening birds. And it's a perfect time to just chill. This is an archival box. As you can see, it's covered with fabric, acid-free, to store books and documents. And we're going to open it together and have a look at some of the old books from the study. And maybe we'll read a story or two. As you can see, they're also in acid-free sleeves. These thick sleeves will keep the paperbacks from any more wear and tear, like the corners bending while they're being stored. So we're going to look at some of these books from childhood and see what treasures we find today. This one is by Payson Terhune. It's an old Scholastic Star edition and cost 35 cents when it was sold. Scholastic Book Services, 33 West 42nd Street, New York, New York. Now this author, Terhune, was a very interesting man indeed. His mother had lived in the antebellum South of the United States and was one of the first published female authors there. And he himself was very adventurous along with his mother and went by horseback or on horseback in the Middle East and all adventuring. And his mother had a famous garden at her home that was called the Garden from Everywhere because in those days, around the end of the 19th century, you could bring in plants and flora from anywhere without worrying about quarantine and things. So this one was purchased at the used bookstore and some used bookstore. So it looks like it's been read and loved quite a lot and has changed hands a few times. As you can see the names there. This one doesn't have a date in the front, but I know that it was written around the very beginning of the 20th century. And this man, Terhune, lived at a place called Sunnybank in New Jersey, where he had lots of collie dogs. He bred them, and he wrote stories about them. And I think they became very popular, very popular among children, but adults alike, even though he had already had quite a career as an author and writer for newspapers and other publications. Also, I think he'd published his books, biographical accounts of places and things. I can tell you that these books just smell wonderful opening them up. It takes me back to the old library when I was a child. I used to spend summers in the old library in my little town where I was a child. My grandfather used to take me to the library, and this library hadn't really been touched much, the children's section anyway, in probably 70 years. There were still books there from the early 20th century, books about the First World War, personalities famous then, all kinds of interesting things that a young child would really love to read. Adventures, history, biographies, fantasy. And this was one of the ones I picked up. Not this particular book, but books by Payson Terhune. Also read this one, Lad, but this book did not come from the library, that is to say. So it was among those early 20th century authors that made a big impression on an interested child. The next one we have is a little golden book. If you remember, these were put out in, I think, the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They always had these hard card covers with shiny pictures in the front, and the artists, some of them were really drew beautiful things. We've done a few in the study here. Tibor Kage, I think, was one of them. This one, Lilian Obligado. So some of the pictures, you can remember all your life if you read one of these books as a child, these golden books. And you can probably remember some of the stories, like the Color Kittens, and I remember one about a girl on a Pacific island that had a wooden doll. This one says it's copyrighted in 1960 by Western Publishing Company. I always loved this story. It's a very simple story in effect, but there's so much that not only a young child can learn from it, but so many things that are sort of profound, have a profound meaning as you go through life. Shall we read this one together? 4 puppies. And here you can see different seasons, so you know it's about the seasons. There were once 4 new puppies who lived in a warm, dark corner by the stove. Those puppies had never been outdoors because they were too little. They didn't know about sky or trees or grass. They didn't even know about summer or fall or winter or spring until they were old enough to go out the door to the sunny porch outside. At first, the stairs were too big for the little puppies to go down. Then one day, the stairs didn't look so big anymore. "They are smaller," said one puppy. "No, we are bigger," said his brothers. Then those 4 little puppies went flop, hop, and tumble down the stairs and into the great big world outside. They sniffed at the fresh green smell of the grass. They raced on the grass, and they rolled on the grass, and they turned somersaults on the grass all afternoon. "Oh my, what a fine place this is," said the 4 little puppies. Every day, the 4 puppies went out to play. They pounced at caterpillars. They chased butterflies. They ran round and round after their shadows. They had so much fun that they hated to go inside, even when there was nice, hot chicken broth for supper. Then one morning, the stairs looked even smaller. "And we're even bigger," said the puppies, and they walked down those stairs, plop, 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 as easy as pie. But the 4 little puppies were so busy playing that they didn't see that the big world was changing too, until it had changed so much that they couldn't play the same games anymore. A funny little wind tickled their ears. They didn't have shadows because the sun was behind a cloud. The grass felt cool. The butterflies had gone. The caterpillars were hiding. And the leaves began to turn yellow and red. "Oh dear," said the puzzled puppies. The next day, whoosh, the wind knocked all the petals off a rose. And swoosh, it blew leaves right off the trees. Those 4 puppies tried to put the petals back on the rose. They tried to put the leaves back on the trees, but they couldn't, so they started to cry. "You silly billies, there's nothing to cry about," said a friendly red squirrel in the hickory tree. "When leaves turn red and yellow and come off the trees, it means that summer is over and fall has come. Why, you'll just have more fun than ever." And the squirrel was right. Leaves as crisp as cornflakes covered the ground. The 4 little puppies scuffed around in leaves and buried themselves under the leaves and kicked leaves up in the air. They had so much fun that they hated to go inside, even when there was lamb chops for supper. Then one morning, the puppies went out to play. They didn't have to walk, plop, plop, down the stairs. They could jump down the steps 2 at a time. "They are even smaller," said one puppy. "No, we are even bigger," said his brothers. But they didn't see that the big world was changing too, until it had changed so much that they couldn't play the same games anymore. A rough wind blew their ears back and blew the leaves clear out of the yard. "Oh dear," cried the puzzled little puppies. They tried to hold on to the leaves, but still they blew away faster and faster. So the puppies started to cry. "You silly billies, there's nothing to cry about," said the friendly red squirrel in the hickory tree. "When there's ice on the puddles and the north wind blows, it means that fall is over and winter has come. You'll just have more fun than ever." And the squirrel was right, for the next day, when the puppies went out to play, everything was white with snow. Every day after that, those poor little puppies parted snow with their noses and slid down the bank and made footprints in the snow. They had so much fun that they hated to go inside, even when there were great big beef bones for supper. One morning, the puppies were so big they could jump down the stairs 3 at a time. But they didn't notice that the big world was changing too, until it had changed so much that they couldn't play the same games anymore. The sunshine was warmer. It wasn't raining, but the water kept dripping from the trees. The snowbank was too small to slide down, and the next day there were bare brown patches of ground with no snow at all. "Oh dear," cried the puzzled little puppies. They tried to push the snow into a pile so they could keep it to play with, but the snow turned to water and sank into the ground right under their paws. So the puppies started to cry. "You silly billies, there's nothing to cry about," said the friendly red squirrel in the hickory tree. "When the sun gets warmer and melts the snow, it means that winter is over and spring has come, and you'll soon guess for yourselves what comes after spring. It's like a wheel turning round and round." And the squirrel was right. Some tiny green stalks poked up out of the ground. The puppies and the stalks grew bigger every day. And one day the puppies jumped down all the steps at once and found leaves and flowers on every stalk. "That's how the big world looked when we first saw it," they cried. And they began to bark happily, for they had guessed what comes after spring. "Summer is what comes after spring," cried the first puppy. "Butterflies again." "Then fall," said the second puppy. "Crisp leaves again." "Then winter," said the third puppy. "Nice white snow again." "Then spring," said the fourth puppy. "Brand new leaves again." "And everything starts all over again every spring," all the puppies cried together. The friendly red squirrel looked down at them from the hickory tree. "Now that you know all that, you are not puzzled little puppies anymore," he said. "What are we then?" asked the puppies. "You are big, brave dogs," he said. And the squirrel was right, as usual. So that story has cheered me up for many, many years, ever since I was very little, and even now. It's a very encouraging story because it lets you think that time passes and people grow and seasons change, but spring will always come again. This one is a tip-top elf book published by Rand McNally, another series of children's book like Golden Books, published in the 60s and 70s. This one cost 29 cents. There's the elf. This one also has a story that's entertaining but with a profound meaning. It's called Peeky Peeky, and it's got some rather interesting characters in it. It's about these two birds that get because each baby bird is different and individual, and so each baby has a different future in store. They have a lot of fun with their parents and all of the village animals. And as they're growing, the parents decide they're going to see this donkey, Mr. Caditchen. I don't know how they came up with such a wonderful name. And Mr. Caditchen is getting some things from his shop to help each little baby bird go out into the world and be what they want to be. One of them became a stork. One of them became a penguin. And one of them became a pelican. One of them became a kingfisher. An ostrich. And the pelican painted the equator line. And I think the one that became a kingfisher stayed with his parents on the river. So some birds went out into the world to do exciting things or find their place in the world, and some decided to stay home. So everyone had their own purpose and way in the world. So there's another one of the treasures from the study's old book collection. What else have we got here? This one's in French by Petit Castor Flammarion, the publisher there. Another children's book publisher published these little paperbacks for French children in the 60s, and you can see it cost 10 centimes. Le Royaume de la Mer. La Mer. And look, Rojankowski. We did something on this artist in the study as well, in our Artist and Illustrator series. It has some beautiful paintings, illustrations of sea life. L'étoile de mer, sea star, les gorgones, les méduses, jellyfish. Look at that. Look at these weird creatures. Qu'est-ce que ça peut bien être? What in the world can these things be? Oh, octopus. Look at that. Weird looking cuttlefish. Squids. Lobsters. Horseshoe crab. Fish. Look at all the colors. Oh, and the ones in the deep with the big teeth. So there's our Petit Castor. The next one, the roundabout train. You can see this one's also been well loved, and this is another famous children's book publisher called Telltale Books. You might recognize some of these pictures from your childhood as well. It's been around for ages. This one is about a diesel engine that comes to town and disturbs things in the old There's a big, tall, thin hill. Look at all these trains, the steam engines. And the diesel comes to town and he's very arrogant. And he thinks he's the bee's knees or the big cheese. And these steam engines decide they have to put him in his place so that he becomes part of the community rather than trying to be a bully. So they convince him to go on a certain route, and he ends up chasing his own caboose around along the big tall hill and not catching it. And the caboose is wondering why he's chasing him. And he kept going and going. And eventually he realizes his mistake, and he realizes that he's been a bit arrogant and foolish and hasn't made life easy for the steam engines, and so apologizes and everybody gets along. So even if that sounds idealistic, I think it's still something that adults would do well to remember. So that's the roundabout train. This one, you know, because we did a big video on kingfishers here in the study. Martin Pêcheur. This one's also by Flammarion with Rojankowski as the illustrator. And if you've seen the video, and I'll put a link just there. This is read in French by the French Whisperer and by me in English with a loose translation. It's a beautiful story about a man who walks around and observes the nature around him on the river. And it's about the kingfishers that he sees and how he observes their lives as they raise a family and grow old together. It's a very touching story, I find, because you get really attached to these two kingfishers, Martin and Martine, because they mate for life, if I remember correctly, the kingfisher. And you also see this narrator's connection to them, as he's used to seeing them every day. And he writes about their life, their babies, and in the end, as all creatures do, even people, one of them gets old and passes away, and it's very sad. Very sad. Almost makes me cry just looking at it. And the seasons go by and life goes on. And that is some ink that I accidentally splattered on this book when I was painting. So I like to use children's book illustrations for inspiration sometimes. And I guess I got a little sloppy. And this is a letter that I found in a desk, and so I put that in to some acid-free plastic there. I think I'm going to turn this book sideways because I don't want it resting on its spine. You can hear the birds outside now. it's evening and they're all doing their evening ablutions, evening songs. And there you have one of the boxes of the study's treasures. And we'll close that up and keep it safe so that we'll be able to look at these books again and again and keep the memories and thoughts and feelings alive that help us get by in the world every day and understand the world around us and the people in it just a little bit better. I hope you are nice and relaxed and that you have a beautiful sleep. Be good to yourself, be kind to others, and be extraordinary.